Hey, hi YouTube, Mr. User Boss here, and this is going to be my full review of the Goophone i6, which is the fake iPhone 6 that's been floating around, and it's causing absolute havoc in the market. So as you know, the iPhone 6 has not even released yet, and we are already seeing fakes, so this is impressive. So taking a look at the design of the phone, I have to say I like what they've done here. So this replica phone is actually based off the iPhone dummy model that was floating around recently in the news and stuff, and I have to say I like what they've done here. I actually think it looks better than the previous iPhones, and I'd be more than happy if Apple actually took this direction with their own phones. It's very, very light, and it's a lot slimmer than all the previous generation iPhones. Only thing is, on the replica we only have a mono speaker on the bottom instead of a stereo one, but quite surprisingly they've actually adopted the Lightning connector used by Apple phones, and that's real commitment. I also really like the buttons on the side. They're nicely raised and feel fairly responsive. However, there is a slight time lag between actually pressing them and receiving a response. So taking into account the packaging, presentation and the looks and feel of the device, I'm going to give it a 16 out of 20 in terms of build. It actually looks just like I would expect the iPhone to, and it's thin, it's light, and it doesn't feel too flimsy. Now to talk a little bit about the software, and this is where things get very interesting. So this is actually a fully blown Android device, yet you could not tell. I mean, this looks just like an iPhone, and Goophone has actually built their own custom operating system on top of Android to make it look just like iOS 7, and I don't think you can deny they've done a good job with it. There's actually very few times when you can tell, and I think just on a quick glance, almost anyone would be fooled. Now on the spec side of things, this thing is just a tad underpowered. So it's running a quad-core MTK processor with 1GB of RAM and a QHD display. So these specs would have fit pretty neatly in the market around 2 years ago. So if you actually compare it to the modern Android devices, it doesn't compare very well. But that's not really the point of this phone. So one thing to note is that because this phone is actually lacking the standard Android functionality, you actually have to have it built into an on-screen overlay. So if you ever want to actually click the back button, you have to first press this button and then click it, which is pretty cumbersome and gets in the way. And this little overlay thing is present whether you're playing games, watching movies, or playing music, or doing anything. Now one thing that I was really impressed by is the settings menu. I mean, if you just go into it, you are again going to totally forget you're actually on an Android device. This is the iPhone. And one of the cheeky inclusions they have is that when you actually go into software update, it tells you you're on iOS 7.1.1 and that there's no need to update, which is kind of funny. So the actual phone does come with the Play Store pre-installed, which is always good news. However, I did have a couple of problems getting some of the apps to work. It kept telling me to sort of insert an SD card, even though there's supposed to be 8GB of internal storage. Now generally speaking, I was also very impressed with the built-in applications. Now one of two things happens when you open them. It'll either launch a custom designed, built from the ground up app that is basically made to look exactly like Apple's one, made by Goophone themselves, or it will launch the Android equivalent, for example with the email app. Now to take a little look at the camera. So the camera is where things start to diverge. This looks nothing like the camera on the iPhone, and it's really not that great. So on the spec sheet at least, it seems pretty impressive. It's a 13 megapixel sensor. However, the actual quality of the lens is really quite poor. It can't seem to focus on objects that are anywhere near close, and I have to say when you zoom in, it doesn't actually look like a 13 megapixel image. Furthermore, the actual app itself is very basic. It looks like the kind of thing we would have seen on Android 2.0 or Android 3.0, and so I have to say I'm unimpressed by the rear camera, but the front camera is still adequate. So the Goophone i6 only having a mono speaker already puts it at a disadvantage, and furthermore it's not even a good one. It's tinny and suffers from distortion at higher volumes. The internet browser on the other hand is surprisingly impressive. Now this is a custom made one as per usual, and it's disguised to be Safari. As you can see as well, we also have the custom iPhone keyboard, and this is again, it's not actually too bad, but it's definitely not as good as the original iPhone one. It does have some input lag and occasionally the keys just get stuck. However, it's pretty accurate and you shouldn't make too many mistakes on it. So the internet browsing searching is very quick, and to be honest I have to say I'm pretty impressed by the performance. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the phone, but hey, you know what, I'm actually pleased with it. And to be honest, I was surprised with how smooth the scrolling is. Even on complex web pages with lots of images and even videos playing, it seems to handle them fine. So maybe, I don't know, with some optimization, maybe even the OS could be a bit smoother, because occasionally that does lag as well. So gaming on the other hand is a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, some games actually work perfectly, and generally most of the 2D ones, which are generally the better ones, I'd say, are fine. However, some of the games which require more precise control are a little bit limited by the smaller display, and to be honest, I just get the feeling that this display isn't quite as accurate as some of the more modern smartphones. Not only is the colour reproduction and resolution quite low, I was actually just not impressed by the actual way it picked up my touch, as if there was a slight bit of lag, as well as just not being quite accurate. Maybe it just requires calibration, but whatever it was, I didn't like it. And 3D gaming performance is subpar. It runs no more than 25 frames per second. So to conclude on the features front, I have to say the iPhone 6 replica has actually got quite a few different features. It's got most of the built-in apps you'd expect, and they all work surprisingly well. However, the camera lens is poor, the speaker lacks clarity, and frankly I've seen better value for money. However, you really do have to give it to them for actually recreating this whole iPhone look, and I think that in itself deserves some credit. So overall, I'm giving this phone a 19 out of 30 for features. So the performance is going to be a bit more difficult because on this phone especially, it sways wildly from being exceptional to being awful. You know, for example, on the lock screen and the internet browser, it's super smooth, and then when it comes to games, it just gets totally crushed. It doesn't feel as fast as the iPhone, quite obviously, and to be honest, it's also probably beaten by similarly priced Android devices, for example the Moto G. So in some ways, maybe it would have been better off if they just stuck with an Android phone within the iPhone case. So for performance, this phone is getting a 31 out of 50. So my overall verdict is a 66 out of 100. It's a solid attempt, it's a pretty unique device, but I wouldn't really recommend it as your go-to daily driver. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more.